Immigration, the economy, abortion, and masculinity. I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. It's Labor Day weekend. Usually this marks the start of the final dash toward Election Day. But of course, we haven't stopped sprinting all summer long. Despite all the effort and expenditures by the candidates and their campaigns, the presidential election is neck and neck. Several polls were released at the end of this week, and they all tell a similar story. A new USA Today Suffolk poll shows Vice President Harris ahead of former President Trump nationally, 48-43. Big shifts from Hispanic, Black, and young voters are helping Harris, but the biggest change came from lower-income voters. They supported Donald Trump over Joe Biden by 3 percentage points back in June. Harris now leading in that demographic, 58-35%, casting a 23-point advantage. Then there's a new Wall Street Journal poll, which also shows Harris with a narrow lead over Trump, 48-47. That's in a head-to-head matchup. The national polls are interesting, but of course, presidents get elected in the Electoral College, so all eyes remain on 7 battleground states. Bloomberg News and Morning Consult have Harris leading in 6 of the 7 battleground states, a tie with Trump in Arizona. Harris's largest margin is in the state of Wisconsin, where she leads by 8. The Harris campaign clearly has the momentum, but many of these polls, they fall within the margin of error. Nevertheless, because of the advantage Republicans enjoy in the Electoral College, polling guru Nate Silver's forecast predicts that it's Donald Trump who has a 52.4% chance of winning the Electoral College compared to Harris's 47.3%. Back in 2020, Silver's forecast model predicted at about Labor Day weekend that Biden had a 71% chance of beating Trump. Then again in 2016, he gave Hillary Clinton essentially the same odds. The gender divide that's reflected in the candidates themselves is mirrored in polling among young Americans. Writing for the New York Times this week, Claire Kane Miller observed the following, quote, "In some ways, this presidential election has become a referendum on gender roles, and the generation with the biggest difference in opinion between male and female voters is Generation Z. On one side are young women who as a group are very liberal. They've been politically galvanized by gender bombshells like #MeToo, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and the candidacy of Vice President Kamala Harris. On the other are young men, some of whom feel that rapidly changing gender roles have left them behind socially and economically, and see former President Donald J. Trump as a champion of traditional manhood." A recent New York Times Siena College poll finds young voters have the greatest gender divide compared to every other age group. It's 51 points. In other words, men between the ages of 18 and 29, they favor former President Trump over Vice President Harris by 13 points. Women in the same age group are choosing Harris over Trump by 38 points. Since women started entering the workforce, pursuing higher education in larger numbers in the 70s, young women today are making strides in economic equality, earning more college degrees than men, and serving more often as their family's primary breadwinner. Men, on the other hand, are working less. Many are living without a spouse or a partner. A Pew study found less than a fifth of Americans believe that the progress women have made in society came at the expense of men. But 40% of men supporting Trump between the ages of 18 and 49 do believe the progress of women came at their expense. And Trump has been trying to reach out to this demographic, doing podcasts and golfing with the Nelk Boys, joking around with Theo Von, appearing on YouTube with Jake and Logan Paul, as well as with streamers like Aiden Ross, reaching the millions of young men who follow these social media personalities. As the New York Times put it, these repeated collisions of testosterone-fueled orbits are a campaign strategy, not a coincidence. Look, that our young men today are struggling in comparison to young women, it's borne out in the data, raising the question of whether it's time for a targeted intervention. Consider that at the Democratic Party website, there's a list under the heading, Who We Serve, of 16 different demographic groups. They include African Americans, the faith community, LGBTQ+ community, rural Americans, and women, but not men. Which brings me to today's poll question at Smerconish.com. Are policy solutions necessary to address the plight of young men who are underperforming in schools and leading unhealthier lives than young women?